Hello everyone and welcome back to our TKT video lesson. In today's lesson, we will be looking at Unit 22, Choosing Assessment Activities from Module 2, Part 1 of the TKT course book. In this unit, we will explore how teachers can select suitable assessment activities based on their learners' needs and learning objectives. We will examine different types of assessment activity. So, by the end of this lesson, you will have a clearer understanding of how to choose appropriate assessment activities and how they can support effective teaching and learning. So, let's get started. First, let's clarify what we mean by assessment. Assessment is the process of collecting information about learner performance, progress, or attitude in order to make decisions about their learning. There are two main types of assessment: formal assessment and informal assessment. Formal assessment usually involves planned activity such as tests and examinations. These are used to collect information about learner progress, for example, a final exam or a reading test to check student achievement. On the other hand, informal assessment happens naturally during lesson. Teachers use it by monitoring and observing learners while they are doing everyday classroom activities. For example, a teacher may listen to students during a speaking activity and take note about their language use. Both types of assessment are important because they help teachers understand learners' strengths, difficulties, and progress, and they allow teachers to make better decisions about future teaching and learning. Now, let's look at some key concepts related to formal and informal assessment. As we can see in the table, formal and informal assessment differ in terms of the tasks, purposes, and marking. Formal assessment usually include planned assessment tasks such as tests and examinations. The purpose is to measure learner overall language ability or achievement. For example, a proficiency test can show a learner general language level, while an achievement test can check what students have learned at the end of the course. A progress test, on the other hand, is used during a course to see how much learners have improved. Formal assessment usually involve grades or marks, such as percentages, pass or fail results, or letter grades. In contrast, informal assessment takes place during normal teaching and learning activities, such as speaking tasks, group work, or homework. The main purpose is to provide feedback. It helps teachers understand how successful their teaching has been and decide whether they need to change their materials or teaching procedures. It also gives learners information about what they can do well and what they still need to improve. Unlike formal assessment, informal assessment usually does not involve official grade. Instead, teachers and learners may simply keep records of progress and use this information to support learning. In short, we can simply say that formal assessment is more structured and often graded, while informal assessment is ongoing and mainly used to give feedback and improve learning. This table shows different types of formal assessment activity that we can use to assess learner performance. I'm not going to explain each activity in detail because the table already provides a clear explanation. It shows that what each activity is used to assess, that is, language knowledge or language skills, whether it reflects real-life language use, and how easy or difficult it is to mark. Please take a few minutes to study the table on your own, as understanding these assessment activities is important for every teacher. Every assessment activity has both advantages and disadvantages, so it is important to use a variety of assessment activity in a formal test. For example, multiple choice question and true-false item test single items, and they are quick and easy to mark and provide clear information about language learner's specific language knowledge. However, they do not tell us anything about the learner's ability to produce longer samples of language. On the other hand, activity such as interviews and summary writing give us much more information about learners' language knowledge or their ability to use the language. However, they assess many skills at the same time. Therefore, it may be difficult for us to focus on specific area of a learner performance. Single focus activity such as multiple choice or gap fill tasks are practical to design and usually provide reliable results. However, they often test learners' knowledge about language rather than their ability to actually use it. They can also be less realistic and can have a negative effect on the way we teach. Imagine a teacher wants to teach the past simple tense using a single focus test, as can be seen on the slide. The learner can choose the correct answer when, so the teacher might think that the learner understands the form. However, in real life, the learner may still struggle to use the past tense in communications. In other words, the learner knows the correct answer in a test, but cannot use the language naturally. So, the test format can influence the teacher's teaching style, causing lessons to focus more on memorizing rules and choosing answers rather than developing real language skill. On the other hand, activities that require learner to produce whole text or longer samples of spoken language are more authentic because they reflect real-world communications. The drawback is that they are less practical to mark and the result can be less reliable. So, it is important to understand the balance between practicality and reliability when choosing assessment activities. Single focus activities are especially useful when we want to assess receptive skills. These activities help us check whether learners have understood a text or recording accurately. When we want to assess productive skill, extended tasks are usually more appropriate. Activities like writing a summary, giving a presentation, or taking part in an interview allow learners to produce language in a more realistic way. Although these tasks are less practical to mark and may involve more subjective judgment, they provide a better picture of how learners use English in real-life communications. So, choosing between objective and subjective assessment, involves considering the strengths and limitations of each type of assessment. Objective tasks are generally easier and more reliable to mark, while subjective tasks provide rich evidence of language ability. For this reason, many teachers combine both types of assessment to gain a balanced understanding of learner performance. So far, we have covered formal assessment activities. Let's look at one of the informal assessment activities discussed in the textbook. That is a portfolio assessment, also known as continuous assessment. We use this type of assessment to assess student learning and development over a longer period. So, what is a portfolio? It is a collection of student work completed over weeks, months, or even an entire course. It may include writing assignments, reading activities, projects, and sometimes the student's own reflection or self-evaluations. By examining all of these pieces together, teacher can see how much the student has improved over time. For example, imagine an English learner. The student writes a paragraph with many grammatical mistakes in the first month of the course, let's say in September. The same student writes a well-organized essay with very few errors by December. Looking at this, we can assume that a single test might only show the student's current level, but a portfolio clearly shows the student progress from September to December. Another important point is that portfolios can be used not only by teachers for assessment, but also by students for self-assessment. Students can review their own work, identify their strengths, and recognize areas that they need improvement. Now, let's look at some of the advantages of portfolio assessment. Portfolios are easy to integrate into teaching and learning. The work included in a portfolio is usually part of student normal classroom activity. Teachers don't have to create completely new assessment tasks. For example, if students write weekly journals, complete homework, or prepare presentations, these pieces of work can simply be added to the portfolio. Another advantage is that portfolios are inclusive. That is, they include a wide variety of student work rather than depending on only one or two tests. This gives learners more opportunity to demonstrate what they can do. For example, a student who becomes nervous during exam may not perform well on a written test. However, that same student may produce excellent projects, class presentations, or creative writing, all of which can be included in the portfolio. The next advantage is portfolios are informative. They provide valuable information for teachers, students, and even parents. Instead of focusing on the test score, portfolios show how students use language in different situations. They include both productive skill and receptive skill. For example, a student portfolio may contain a recorded conversation, a reading comprehension task, a written essay, and a listening activity. Together, these give teachers a more complete understanding of a learner's language ability than a single exam. Another advantage is that portfolios are developmental. That is, assessment is continuous rather than being a single event. This means teachers can observe learning as it develops over time. For example, support a student scores 60% on the first writing task, 70% on the second, and 85% on the final task. The portfolio clearly demonstrates steady improvement instead of showing only one final score. And portfolios are also reflective. So students often write comments about their own work. They think about questions such as, what did I do well? What was difficult? What should I improve next time? This reflection helps students become more independent learners. For example, after giving a presentation, a student might write, I presented more confidently this time, but I still need to improve my pronunciations. So this reflection becomes part of the portfolio. Although portfolios have many advantages, they also have some disadvantages. One challenge is that the teacher may have a large amount of marking at one time, especially if every student has many portfolio entries. In addition, marking portfolios can sometimes be subjective, which means that different teachers might give different scores to the same piece of work. For example, one teacher may think an essay deserves 8 out of 10, while another teacher may give it 5 because they focus on different aspects of the writing. One way to overcome this problem is through continuous assessment. In continuous assessment, every piece of work that students complete during the course contributes to the final grade. Instead of marking everything at the end of the term, teachers assess students regularly throughout the course. For example, a teacher might calculate the final grade like this: class participation, project, oral presentations, homework, and final exam. This approach reduces the amount of marking at one time and provides a fairer picture of student overall achievement. In short, although portfolio and continuous assessment require considerable time for marking and may involve some subjectivity, they help teachers evaluate students more fairly and accurately. To help you practice what you have learned today, I have also included a sample TKT task. Please try this sample task. Take a few minutes to answer the question on your own before checking the answers. The answers are provided in the video description below, so don't forget to compare your answer and see how you did. I hope you now have a better understanding of how to select suitable assessment activities according to your learner's need and learning objective. If you found this lesson helpful, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss future TKT lessons. Thank you very much for watching this video lesson, and I will see you in the next lesson. Happy teaching and happy learning. Bye bye.